Well, welcome to Father and Son. Nice to see you, Tom.
Good to be here, Dad.
We're going to talk a bit about the disaster, the oil spill by BP in the Gulf in America. What's your handle on it?
Well, it certainly is a disaster. I mean, as far as oil spills go, compared to, say, the Exxon Valdez, which was more than 20 years ago now, this is significantly worse. An interesting piece of information I came across, many people are saying how many billions of dollars this will cost BP to clean up. Actually, if BP doesn't want to pay for it, the US government is required to pay for it.
How does that occur?
Well, in the early 90s, the US government was anxious to encourage oil exploration in the Gulf of Mexico to reduce the country's dependence on foreign oil after the first Gulf War. So they said to any drillers, any operators of rigs in the Gulf, if there's a major spillage, you only have to pay the first 75 million, and that, this oil spill is going to cost.
The BP have come out saying they will pay for it all.
They've said they will pay, but they don't have to. And some people think that the fact that the US government was going to always cover spillage costs means that drillers haven't perhaps taken the precautions that they otherwise might have, because they've always thought, well, if it all goes wrong, it's not going to be us that has to pay. So again, it's potentially an example of a short-sighted government policy which might have resulted in bad standards, and as we
say, even the way they handled it, it seemed to be operated out of BP were operating it out of London. Their CEO was making these rather, what I thought, inane PR type comments. Now, remember, we had a spill here in Australia way back when, and BHP and Esso, they had a fire, and they sent out Red Adair, and within a week you'd fixed it all up.
Well, that's right. In this case, though, the fire was the initial thing, and that did kill, I think, 10 workers on the platform. 11. But of course, then the problem was the oil gushing out from the ruptured pipe, and it's in a very deep part of the Gulf. I mean, the technology to go and fix this sort of thing is still in its infancy.
It's not as though you can send a human being down that far.
Well, not unless they're in some incredibly complicated bathysphere, and then they wouldn't be able to do anything. So they're using robots, the technology of which is a bit like sticking a thing on Mars or the moon. Anyway, it's going to cost BP billions. The company's share price is down more than 30% since the disaster unfolded. It's done maybe not irreparable damage, but very extensive damage to the company's brand. But I think in the US, people realise that, this is the cost of drilling for oil. As much as anybody likes to sheet home the blame just to BP, my view is that if we have a petroleum or fossil fuel-based economy, which we obviously do, these sorts of spillages sadly are inevitable.
Which raises the issue, this country is still ridiculous that we will not even look at nuclear power, because that is the solution.
Well, it's the only solution we currently have. Every time I read an article here about, let's have a green electric car, it's just nonsense in Australia. An electric car is a coal-powered car. In fact, an image I like to use, in World War I, when oil was in short supply, they actually put these big bags of coal dust on the roofs of cars and powered internal combustion motors with coal dust. Now, effectively, an electric car is nothing more than that. It's a coal-powered car. It's just as polluting as a petrol-powered car, but the pollution is shifted from the city where the car is to wherever the power plant is. In Victoria, it's Hazelwood. In New South Wales, it's any number of places. So unless we go to nuclear power, it's pointless having electric cars.
The Labor Party won't embrace it at all. They don't even look at it, and it is probably, even to help the clean up of the air, nuclear power is clearly the best solution.
Absolutely. And we are part of the global nuclear industry. We are a major supplier of uranium. We have 40% of the world's reserves. We sell it to other countries. It's hypocritical in the extreme to say, we'll dig it up and we'll sell it, but we don't want to have any part in doing our bit for greenhouse gas emissions.
So what's going to happen to BP's share price? It looks like they reckon they're capturing 10,000 barrels a day.
Which is about half of the size of the spill.
Well, they say it's nearly all of it. The government is saying it's somewhere between 10 and 20. They don't know how many. But let's say they've got half or maybe 2/3. And then, of course, in a few months' time, they'll put a new pipe in.
Yeah.
That'll take 2 or 3 months.
And they'll start making some money from the oil again. Look, a lot of people think BP will be taken over as a result of this. There's any number of companies like Exxon, for example, that would want to buy it. A lot of the damage is the BP brand, and so I think if someone were to buy BP and just get rid of the BP brand, in a sense that would go some way to stopping the corporate damage. And remember, just about every major oil company in the world is in the Gulf of Mexico, and they all know there but for the grace of God go I. So I don't think this is going to be the last of these sorts of spills.
Well, I think if I were a punting man, I had some good speculative money, I'd be buying BP shares.
Well, that's right. I mean, look, BP has got a big clean-up bill. It's got a big problem here, but it's got oil assets all over the globe. It's a very profitable company, and its profitability is not going to be destroyed by this. Maybe its image will a bit, but you can argue it didn't have that good an image in the first place. So yes,
right.
Well, I mean, it's all right, but I mean, as oil company, oil companies have a bad image in some people's minds. So yeah, there's no reason it should be down quite so much.
All right, let's shift off BP. If you want a good spec, I'd buy BP. How's the market? I mean, the markets in Europe are in turmoil. Looks like Hungary might default on its sovereign debt. You've still got problems in Spain and Portugal. This is creating a lot of uncertainty.
Oh, it is.
Markets down.
And in Britain, I mean, both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer have said that Britain faces a generation-long what they call period of below average growth, which is a nice way of saying a recession.
Because they've got to repay, they've got
to repay debt, and they're going to cut government spending to do it.
And Germany announced today the biggest cut since World War II.
Well, it's like all these countries are competing to have who can have the biggest austerity package. But of course, here in Australia, we're doing it a different way by imposing new taxes. Look, the market's up quite strongly today, up 1.3% this morning. It was down dramatically yesterday, down almost 3% in a day, which is pretty catastrophic.
Yeah.
But the reality is that no one really knows. There was an interesting program on Four Corners last night about the resources profits tax. If you see that as encouraging a renegotiation between the mining industry and the government, you'd be buying mining shares.
It seems certain that that's got to happen.
Well, the government's done a major miscalculation. I mean, they thought that this would be a risk-free tax. Instead, they've got the union movement or elements of it offside. A lot of voters don't really understand it.
The other people is, it was the Labor government that increased everybody going into superannuation. Now, if you're in superannuation in Australia, you'd have to be in BHP and Rio.
Absolutely.
And they all going down in value. So there's a lot of people, when they get their superannuation results, are going to be very unhappy with the market falling.
Well, look, Australians are much better educated about finances than they were, whether it's public finance or just the value of their own super fund. And they know that you can't just rip $9 to $12 billion a year, which is what the resources tax will do, without having some negative consequences on the value of, say, shares.
It takes 9 to 12 billion out, and you multiply that by 10, that's 90 to 100 billion out of the market value.
Well, coincidentally, that's 10% of Australia's annual GDP. So, it's a very big number.
It's interesting looking at the polls that the people against the tax are going up. Queensland, which is going to be very important for the federal election, Labor could lose up to 8 seats, and they could lose 2 or 3 in the West. That would lose them government.
That would lose them government. Look, they're bound to lose a lot of seats in Queensland. I think they've already written off Western Australia as a lost cause. And they're desperately trying to convince the inner city voters, essentially in Sydney and Melbourne, to say that the resources tax is a good thing. They're obviously not doing it. And they're not doing a good job, and also the advertising campaign is really on the nose. So look, it's interesting times. It isn't a risk-free tax. I think it will be renegotiated. The moment you think that's the case, mining stocks will go up.
Okay, that's it for this week. We'll be back next week on whatever's newsworthy. And we just hope that not too many public servants lose their jobs in Europe, but they've always had far too many people. Thank you.